Outriders represents a pivotal point for Game Pass. The loot-driven shooter from Bulletstorm developer People Can Fly is one of the biggest third-party games to launch day and date on Game Pass. It debuted back in April, and the service has provided a reliable player floor for this new multiplayer-driven IP. Its success has led to other big third-party multiplayer games like Back 4 Blood and Knockout City to try the same strategy. Outriders is now finally included in the PC version of Game Pass. But has it improved much from its promising but flawed launch? Let's find out if Outriders is a Game Pass or a game fail.
Okay, you wanna play? Then let's play.
After humans have destroyed Earth, the remains of civilization have arrived on the planet Enoch. You are one of the Outriders who must ensure a planet is safe before the general population disembarks. Your efforts to convince the higher-ups to postpone the planet's recolonization fall on deaf ears, which leads to you coming face-to-face with a massive energy storm.
If we land now, everyone will die.
There's no holding the landing. It's too late for that. There's nowhere else to go.
Called the Anomaly, it quickly decimates the landing force. You survive the encounter, but are mortally wounded and put back into cryostasis for 31 years. When you awake, the planet has turned into a hellscape of constant war. As an immortal soldier with special powers, it's your job to fight the insurgents and save humanity.
Shoot first, questions later!
The initial promise of Outriders is an interesting one. Help re-establish civilization while fighting off human, environmental, and biological threats. Some of the initial scenes on Enoch are visually stunning, but after your 31-year slumber, the world has turned brown, gray, and red. The environments do eventually get more interesting, but it's not a great second impression. The game follows the typical fish-out-of-water template. It's not awful, but it's also not especially compelling. It's hard to stay invested when the most interesting parts of the plot happen in its first hour.
So for 31 years, I've been seeing people fight and die while you were getting comfy in cryo. So excuse me for not throwing you a little welcome party.
Outriders has two different flavors to its third-person shooting. The primary mode is a cover-based shooter where you fight waves of enemies in arenas full of waist-high walls. But there are also sections where you gun down creatures out in the open. The main twist to the gunplay is that you must kill enemies to replenish your health. Combined with aggressive foes that will flank and flush you out of the destructible cover, it promotes a less passive gameplay style from what you might expect. There's also an effective melee system that ties into another important gameplay element, interrupting enemies. Allow them to power up, and you're in trouble. But if you catch them while doing so, they're easy to take out. It's a lot to consider in the heat of the moment. If there's one complaint, it's that the barrage of particle effects in the air at any given time can obscure enemy positions. Sometimes we feel like we are watching the radar as much as the actual battlefield. Outriders can be played solo, but it's designed to be played in teams of 3. Its primary innovation is letting you pick from 4 classes with their own skills and specialties. We've been playing as the Technomancer, a ranged class that summons gadgets like turrets to take out enemies. But weapons are just half the equation. Each class also has special powers. Right from the jump, these attacks are just as powerful as any of the game's guns, so learning to mix the two while monitoring cooldown meters is integral to success. It adds more variety to the combat than most games in the genre, especially when you are playing cooperatively with other classes. Enemies also have their own skills, which keeps the combat from ever turning into a repetitive pattern. Boss battles require a lot of strategy to complete versus just flanking them and unloading your arsenal or circle strafing. Square Enix has made a point to try and not position Outriders as a game as a service, but it has a similar loot system where you are constantly picking up better weapons and armor. The problem is that there just aren't enough different types, and most new weapons you stumble across are just a point or two better than the one you had before. While you are leveling your character with stats and skill points, the world itself is also leveling up. The world tier level controls enemy difficulty and loot drop rarity. And the best part is that you can raise or lower it whenever you want. It doesn't make the enemies smarter or less cunning, it just adjusts how much damage they can absorb. If there's one genre on Game Pass that has plenty of options, it's the third-person shooter. But Outriders still stands out against the stiff competition. The Gears of War franchise isn't loot-driven, but it does feature extensive cooperative and competitive options that have expanded over time. While the Halo games are played from the first-person perspective, they are also great shooters with cooperative and competitive elements. Halo Infinite has also changed the franchise a bit since it takes place in an open world and has some light loot elements. It will also eventually feature cooperative play. Back 4 Blood is a cooperative zombie blaster that should sustain over the long haul. If you're just looking for an enduring game as a service that you can stick with for months and months to come, Marvel's Avengers fits that bill quite nicely. But the best comp is really Destiny 2. It plays in first person, but its loot-driven progression and overall gameplay loop are very similar. The biggest problem is that it's leaving the console side of Game Pass in just a couple days, but it should stay on PC for a bit longer. For the most part, while there are plenty of shooters available, games as a service are just getting going on Game Pass. Now it's time to find out, is Outriders a Game Pass or a game fail?
Oh, come on! We're in the middle of my line.
You are taking too long.
Outriders is technically competent, its concept is interesting, the gunplay feels good, and the classes mix things up, but not much stands out. Despite its mix of traditional weapons and the supernatural, many combat encounters and environments feel the same, especially in the first couple of hours. The interesting boss battles do mix things up, but there's not enough of them. All that said, it's hard to find a true comp for Outriders on Game Pass. There are plenty of shooters both third and first person, but none of them feature the same mix of cover-based combat, loot-driven progression, and supernatural components. Gears of War is a close analog, and Destiny follows the same design, but we're guessing most of you have played those already. Outriders is a solid but unspectacular shooter that's a hoot to play with others. If you're just looking for your next long-term fix, there aren't many true competitors on the service. Outriders gets a Game Pass. For next week, we are looking at Final Fantasy XIII.